Well, are you ready for some football? Are you ready for some IHSA state playoff football? I know I am. I know this knucklehead I'm about to bring in is certainly ready. I think he's been ready since, I don't know, Saturday at about 4 o'clock, I think. Is that about right?
I've been prepping. I'm ready to go. I'm chomping at the bit. I'm like a pit bull in a steakhouse, man.
Okay.
Fun time.
We'll get into this for sure. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Third and Lang. It's going to break down the playoffs for you. We will go through 8-man all the way through 4A, give you our thoughts, kind of give you an idea of who we like in each bracket, and we'll just get right into it and dig into it. So, Matt, I know that you are holding the 8-man bracket, so I know 8-man, just like IHSA, had released their pairings. And so we are excited to see is this the second playoff season for 8-man?
Kind of. Yeah.
Okay. So again, 16-team field, an 8-man single elimination. Fill us in on the bracket. Walk us through it.
Yeah. So, you basically, if I had to kind of just break down the bracket, for 8-man, you have 16 teams. They're going to have some outstanding matchups. The biggest toss-up game in the first round is going to be number 8 St. Thomas More against number 9 Pawnee. St. Thomas More won the first meeting earlier in the year, 28-22. It's going to be interesting to see who comes out this week, as Pawnee is currently nursing a few key injuries, and St. Thomas More is coming off a lopsided loss to Milledgeville. Another intriguing game is LSA versus Martinsville. So that's number 1 versus number 16. The Blue Streaks played one of the most difficult schedules of the season in 8-man, that is Martinsville. They're probably closer to a 10 seed in the state. They've dealt with many injuries this season, but they're healed up. They're firing on all cylinders. There's serious questions about whether LSA's successful run is this a result of good breaks or true talent. We don't really know.
You'll find out starting this week.
Exactly. The last time these teams squared up at LSA in 2021, the Lions, who were ranked number 3 at the time, were upset by unranked Martinsville squad. So there's a little bit of history here. And I think when you get in true seedings in 1 through 16, just like you would in Division II or FCS, back in the day, you got that 16-team bracket, you can throw away the seeds. So the north side of the bracket is fully up in the air. LSA maybe is the favorite, but Milford, Amboy, St. Thomas More, and Pawnee, they could all make it to the championship game. In the bottom half, it's in the south, it's West Central's to lose. You really can't count out Polo with Ted Elston, and even Milledgeville, who had a dominant performance against STM in the regular season final. Those two teams, along with West Central, shouldn't be taken lightly. The matchups, real quick, if you want me to run them down for you, I can. If I can just find my guy. Let's see here. I had it here. I do. It's right here. I'm sorry, guys. So in the northern part of the bracket, you got Decatur, LSA against Martinsville, STM against Pawnee, the 8-9 matchup I was talking about. Amboy at the number 5 seed is at home against Blue Ridge. Blue Ridge is a team that runs the ball, shortens the game, and keeps it close. Milford Cissna Park, 7-2. They're taking on Ashland Franklin Center, and then you go down to the south. West Central, the favorite with Jason Kirby, 9-0 against Jim Morrow and South Beloit. That should be a good matchup. I know Jason has a lot of respect for Jim Morrow. He used to be the coach of McChesney Park, Harlem. Milledgeville, the number 7 seed, is 6-3, taking on West Prairie, 6-3. Polo, 7-2, 6 seed, taking on Hiawatha, 6-3. And then Pat Elder, 8-1, Ridgewood. They're at home against South Fork. Pat Elder is getting a lot of raves, a lot of compliments about his wing tee offense that he had at Richmond Burton, how he's brought that into 8-man football. If you had to kind of do the chalk, I would still look for a West Central and Ridgewood game possibly in that semifinal game. So that's your 8-man report. And again, I'd like to send a shout out to all the guys that have helped me on this. Jordan Hopman's been great. Jason Kirby, Jim Morrow, Pat Elder. They've all been wonderful, and I hope to reach out to a lot of guys as these games unfold.
And we will recap every week what went down, who won, who advanced, and again, once we get past this first round, Matt, I think we'll start bringing in a coach now and again too, and we'll definitely get an 8-man coach in here and start to talk about the playoffs a little bit, whether they're still alive or maybe their team got eliminated. We'll definitely have some little bit more in-depth analysis from some of the coaches for sure, and that goes for 1A through 4A as well.
Sure.
All right, let's start in 1A. We'll work our way through 1A. I'll go through the bracket, and then we'll talk about your thoughts and my thoughts on it a little bit. So again, should I read the bracket or no? What do you think? I think everyone watching this already either has brackets at their job, or they know them offhand already. I pretty much know a lot of these offhand already.
Yeah.
So I guess to me the biggest surprise, I mean, really, I don't know if it was really a surprise, but just, you know, there were a couple of teams that wound up not being in 1A, and I know that it seemed like there was a lot of juggling, and it seemed like there were some teams that kind of got in at 5 and 4s that, you know, early on you just kind of didn't see it coming. So what were your impressions from the 1A field when it was released?
Well, I think overall this 1A through 4A, and we don't have to talk about this too much, but I do think it is kind of an underlining issue, because instead of going 1 through 32, they would go 1 through 16 because of the gas. So if you had to have a theme for all this, I think it would be warm up the bus and fill up the gas. And you know, I think
don't warm up the bus because it's going to burn too much gas.
Exactly.
So,
but I think in 1A, it's pretty insane how many 5 and 4 teams got in this year. You know, there's 13 in Class 1A. You know, when's the last time you've heard of an 8-9 game and both teams are 5 and 4? You know, you got Rova playing against Stark County, and then the winner takes on Lena. So then you have to look at the distance some of these schools are traveling in week 1. You know, gas is over $4 a gallon. I know we're not here to, be CNN and talk to you guys, football fans, about this, but it's just really interesting. You look at Madison traveling up to Colfax, and let's call it how it is. I think every true football fan wanted Colfax Ridgeview to be in the South for, if you're going to go chalk, the potential matchup and rematch. Brown County, a feisty 5 and 4 team, traveling 55 miles to Tuscola in game 1. Villa Grove traveling 130 miles to Jacksonville route. You would have thought maybe the IHSA could have switched up a few things and have Villa Grove playing.
You know what though? If you look at the mapping, and I have the mapping, you can go to IHSA.org, you can go to the playoff section, and the maps are up. The maps hadn't been up. I think today might have been the first day they put the map.
They didn't have them up for the longest time.
Yeah, so the mapping's up. And believe me, there were some other classes. There was a couple of big classes in particular that there were a lot of controversy with the mapping. But, I mean, if you look at their mapping, and again, they're spread out all over the place, even with the north-south cut line, which obviously Gilman was the north furthest. It just makes sense that Gilman right here is the furthest north, as strange as that sounds. If you go according to their mapping, it kind of plans out that way. But I get where you're coming from too. What we will do is I should have done this. And I wonder if like our guys at NUIC or View from the West actually did a 1 through 32 of this class. We'll do that. I just haven't had time because I've been just crazy busy, but I am going to go back and 1 through 32 all 8 classes. And I'm interested to see what the mileage would have been then. Because, you talk about the distance. Now I get it more than ever.
Yeah.
When you look at the differences between Alena Winslow, and Assessor Valor and Dupo. And you're like, okay, yeah, that's a long, long trip if you have to do that.
Yeah.
And so it does make sense. The mapping does make sense, but
and I look at that top half of the northern bracket. Lena with a potential showdown with Fulton. And they've had some battles. It'll be interesting in the southern part of the upper half of the northern bracket. You know, you got Chicago Hope Academy, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later.
Yep.
And then, you know, it's just going to be really interesting. I mean, Forrest and Elena Winslow, maybe a potential matchup in the semis, you know, or the quarterfinals. You know, we're really going to find out kind of, you know, what happens there, you know. And
Yep.
I think in terms of sleepers, you know, everybody wants to talk about Ridgeview being in the South and the potential collision course with Lena. Not so fast, my friends. You know, as Lee Corso would say, you don't count your chickens before they hatch. There's a guy by the name of Brad Dixon that has Camp Point Central playing really good football. Camp Point has only given up an eye-popping 48 points through 8 games, and their schedule consists of 6 teams that will be in this year's playoffs. So, you know, down the road in the quarterfinals, I could see a Tuscola maybe taking on Ridgeview,
Right.
and I think that would be interesting. You know, Andy Romines told me he thinks he has a team that's overcome some injuries, and he has a team that has a defense that is geared to stop the wing tee. You know, talking on some other radio shows tonight, I was talking a little bit about Ridgeview football, and you got to give Hal Kyoto credit. He has several formations and several things he likes to do, but he only runs about 5 or 6 plays. So he's going to make sure teams scout him and prepare for him. But I think 1 through 32 or 1 through 16s, I think we got good football, and we'll see how it folds out after the first round.
What's your take on the far south, the very bottom of the South bracket there? I mean, you know, you got Camp Point Central as a 9-0 as a 2 seed, which, you know, that's obviously the chalk. You know, Greenfield Northwest came in and they lose week 9 to Route. I mean, that I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. Just what's your take overall? Is it going to be chalk there? Is a team like Central A&M maybe a possible sleeper? What's your thoughts?
You know, I think A&M is always going to be a team that's just going to have the players. You know, Weekly has done a great job down there. Kind of taking over for Coach Ramsey, and he's kind of put his own stamp on that. You know, I think an interesting matchup too is just, you know, this Greenfield team that you're talking about against Hardin Calhoun. You know, let's see who wins that game and who can kind of maybe bounce out of that South. But, you know, let's face it. I mean, the bottom half of the South versus the upper half of the South, you know, I think it's contrasting differences in terms of the game. You know, I think Camp Point is the team to beat. But, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. You know, maybe a Jacksonville Route might be a team that you could kind of look out for. You know, up and down, everybody. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so those are just some thoughts, certainly in Class 1A, and let's move on. We'll take a look in 2A, and again, just a couple of things really jumped out when I saw the bracket. I think first and foremost, seeing Maroa Forsyth in the North is just strange.
It's very strange, you know. And it makes that 2A North again. You know, it's kind of like the football guys were good to us. You know, if I had to be kind of sappy here, you know, like a potential state championship with Maroa versus St. Teresa. You know, I mean, It is what it is. You know, I mean, let's think about that. You know, Maroa's been there. They've got credibility. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think Josh Joseph is kind of he's kind of the Lane Kiffin of high school football. You know, he has a little bit of an edge to him. He does a lot of things that, you know, that come across the wrong way to people. I've got nothing but good respect for Josh, but he wins, and he wins a lot.
Right. Yep.
And, you know, he does it down there, and he's taken he's kind of kicked your butt, you know, and just that's how he's done it now. So for him to be in the North, I think it's interesting. I think it's really interesting too how Rock Ridge could be taking on a team that maybe is hitting their stride in Sterling Newman in the first round. They played in week 2 in the regular season. Rock Ridge wins. Clifton Central against Tri-Valley. Watch that game. Brian Spooner against Josh Roop. Tri-Valley took one on the chin. They lost to El Paso. So that should be really interesting. Again, in 2A, you know, make sure you fill up your tank. You got a team like Chester driving 190 miles to St. Teresa, and our Mules from Fairfield, they're driving a nice, measly, simple 180 miles to play North Mac in round 1.
How different is it going to be for Maroa? Well, Maroa's hosting, but taking on North Lawndale Charter from the city. I mean, there's some different looking opponents for the Trojans this year. There's no doubt about it.
It'll be interesting, all the way at the bottom of the bracket in 2A. You do have this team called the Nashville Hornets. They've been there. They've been there a time or two. Don't count these guys out by any means. And they had a stumble against Freeburg earlier in the year. They lost a tough game to Carterville, who is 4A. But they've been playing some really good football lately. They averaged 33 points per game on the season. Nashville has an incredible sports program and everything they do: basketball, baseball, track, and of course football.
Yeah. Strange that they're an 11 seed on the road too. That's just strange. But yeah, you're right. Nashville was one of those teams that, and we talked about Nashville and we talked about Wilmington and North in the same kind of vein, where they have been powers in 3A for a long time. And the enrollment bubble came towards them and dropped them down. And, they're going to be very dangerous teams. I know everyone kind of has overlooked Wilmington since they lost to Reed Custer, and they didn't just lose. They got blown out by Reed Custer. But Matt, I'm telling you, don't overlook Jeff Rientz's teams, because they will be ready, and they're going to be very, very tough in that northern part of the bracket.
Well, and they could come out of that northern part and eventually maybe take on maybe a Bismarck Henning. They'd have to beat Bismarck Henning. They'd have a very tough matchup with Tri-Valley Clifton Central in round 2. Up in the upper half of that bracket. I think an interesting matchup that you might want to be kind of thinking about is this Bloomington Central Catholic team. 6-3. They very easily could be 7-2, 8-1. They come
Would you not be shocked to see both Sterling Newman and Bloomington Central Catholic come out with wins in the first round? Could you see it?
I wouldn't be shocked, but I tell you what, people on the western side of the state, EDGYTIM, they want to see very bad. They want to see a Rockridge versus Aledo. Okay, so that's Taylor Ridge Rockridge against Mercer County. It used to be Aledo. You talk about two schools 20 miles apart that don't like one another. That was Coley Welder's first state championship when Aledo beat Rockridge. They got beat earlier in the year, like 35-0 or 35-7. And he came back and he played Rockridge in the state finals and beat the late Rick Amy for that state championship. So, Sterling Newman against Bloomington Central Catholic. That'd be great. But there's a lot of people that would like to see that Rockridge and Aledo rematch.
So I guess we're going to pick our winners, right?
Yeah, we can a little bit later, or whatever you
want to do. At the end. Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine. All right, moving on to Class 3A. You look at the North. Princeton winds up with the number 1 seed in the North. Reed Custer's the 2 seed. Prairie Central in the South is a 1 seed. And then also Benton is the 2 seed. Of course, Benton hosting your Olympia ball club. So I know that that's an interesting matchup for sure. I know you've had an interesting travel thing going on. So fill us in how things have progressed this week at Olympia to get ready to go down to Benton.
Yeah, well, again, I'm lucky to be the assistant coach, and Eric Lyons deserves all the credit on this. The win that we got Friday night against Petersburg Porta, it was a packed house. It was especially for me as an assistant coach, I got to kind of sit back and enjoy it. At one time, I told Eric, and he couldn't quite do it. I told him, I go, you just look around and look at the crowd. Will you just do that one time and enjoy this? And the people in Olympia and the people in the small towns were excited. It's their first time in the playoffs in quite some time. And we get a trip to go down to Benton. And like everybody else, we can't find a charter bus that we can afford, or no one has a charter bus, or the one we're going to get is going to cost way too much money because everything's just too high.
Right.
So we've decided to make this like a college game day trip. We're going to leave Friday afternoon, get down to Mount Vernon, and just stay in a hotel, let the kids sleep in, have some breakfast, and then walk through things. But Benton, good football team. The home of John Makovic and the home of Doug Collins. They're going to be tough to beat. We feel like we have the game plan and the approach of how to play football to take it to them, but it's going to be a daunting matchup. If we were able to win that game, we would get an old Illini Prairie matchup against St. Joe Ogden, and so
Yep.
I think in 3A, again, I got to say this class is filled with 12 5-win teams.
Yeah.
Can any of them give their first round opponent a great game? Someone I tell you I'm not betting against is a guy by the name of Coley Weller with the 5-4 Sages. If anyone
we had a lot of talk. We had a lot of talk about Monticello on the pairing show.
If anybody can find a way to slow down Mount Carmel, it would be that math teacher that's won 4 state championships. I think he will have a game plan. Again, we got a long trip, and so that'll be interesting for Olympia and all the fans. I think in 3A, I'll just say this, and you've kind of talked about this, and we can go through some of these matchups, but the North bracket is going to be a Royal Rumble, of heavyweights. Princeton, IC Catholic, Stillman Valley, Reed, Custer, Seneca, and Byron. We'll talk a little bit about Seneca a little bit later. But down south, Coach Tim, I'll just tell you this, that Scott Hamilton squad, they lost the first game of the year against Prairie Central. And, it's going to be really interesting. I think down the road, you could see a Prairie Central and a Williamsville in the semis. That would be a spread versus a triple option attack.
Yep.
So you have contrasting styles everywhere you go at. But I think 3A is very unique.
One thing I wanted to bring up, and it has nothing to do with the 3A bracket, but we will get back to that in a moment. One thing that was going around Saturday, and it was confirmed by IHSA, is that they early in the week had put out a memo to member schools discussing and I guess encouraging more schools to schedule Friday night playoff games because of the referee shortage. That, obviously a lot of crews also work college games on Saturday. And that with less and less refs, the worry and the thought being, boy, these guys are so used and plugged into working Fridays. And as you've seen, and the whole state has seen, how quickly the last handful of years we've gone from Friday night to Saturday in the postseason. Now, certainly I think weather has had a part to do with that, where, teams just would rather play on a Saturday at 1 o'clock as opposed to a Friday night at 7:30. Because let's face it, this time of year it can get pretty damn cold. But I find it now. I notice in the smaller enrollments, it pretty much seems more Saturday than Friday. But interestingly enough, up top in the large enrollments, and especially around the Chicagoland area, usually schools that would go Saturday are Friday. So I don't know. And you mentioned tied into buses. That buses are going to be harder to get because you're competing with college football that's running out charter buses, all these others that are, and like everything else in this world, there's limited bus drivers now and there's limited everything else. I just find it interesting how that is kind of tied in with the problems that you guys ran into in Olympia. And I heard that from other coaches as well. And then also, again, we can't get away from the ref shortage, and that being addressed, certainly not up front, not on the pairing show, but it was definitely addressed early in the week to the ADs across the state. And overall, now I don't know what it's going to look like after this round, but certainly in the first round, Matt, I think we are seeing more Fridays and Saturday games.
Well, I would just tell you this. I have a very good friend that is a referee in the Champaign area. He has worked his last 3 or 4 years to he wants to be on a playoff crew, and he's worked really hard. He's gotten in shape. He's cut weight. He's lost some weight. He studies the game film. He has huddle accounts, but he does games for, McKendree, Lake Forest, College.
Yep.
And I know he personally did say something to the powers to be at IHSA, like, hey, just letting you know, if there's any way I could do a Friday night game, I would appreciate it, versus because I got to go to a Saturday game because that's his livelihood. He has another part-time job, but he's trying to do this because he wants to jump up the ranks. And, so I think we had this conversation a long time ago with Jason Kirby, and he told us, teams have got to be a little bit more flexible. Sometimes they might have to play on a Thursday night, Friday or Saturday. I mean, for college, excuse me, I need to slow down. For high school playoffs, you might have to do a Friday night game.
Yeah.
And in terms of this whole fiasco with buses, I'll just say this: the horses and the animals are out of the barn. It's never really going to change. Like the pandemic has messed us up. We don't have people working. We don't have people riding buses, and busing companies have conformed and consolidated. I mean, you just have.
Up here, you drive by every school. There are signs for bus drivers. I mean, there's a great school right off of Route 6. I drive by it. It's still there. Hiring bus drivers.
That's for school bus drivers.
Right.
But also, too, I can tell you right now, and I've joked around this with some teachers. I'm like, if you retire, you probably could go work a Peoria charter and drive a bus and make, have a good living, because they need people all the time.
Yeah.
For shopping trips and for baseball, tennis, soccer, football, they just don't have enough people. And that has a lot to do with how our country has changed in the last 2 years.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right. So these are just different issues.
Pressing issues.
They are, but they obviously have an impact, whether people realize it or not, on how things are going with the state playoffs. Sure. Sticking and finishing up in 3A. You look at what I find interesting as well is it's amazing. It's like all of a sudden all the Chicago Public League teams that are showing up in 3A, 4A, 5A.
Sure.
And again, that was somewhat by design when the Public League redid their conferences and which schools are going to qualify in the playoffs. And I was asked by a few people, a couple downstate, a couple out west, about what are the odds of these schools advancing? And I said slim to none. And I'm just being honest. I'm not being harsh. But, Chicago King really does not have a shot against Immaculate Conception whatsoever. Carver, the same. Catalyst Maria, the same. And again, it's not a diss, but Matt, it's just a different level of football. It really is. I went and watched some film on a couple of these today, actually.
Yeah.
And they're going to be ugly. They're going to be ugly for some games. And, but hey, they qualified. They were able to get in the playoffs. And what I also find interesting is this year, first time ever, we had a 4 and 5 at-large qualifier make the state playoff field. Now, and we had this discussion. I had this discussion with Steve Susi on Saturday night. And we talked about 8-man and talked about the impact that it's had so far, and looking at the playoff field. And obviously we've already added 4 and 5 team. And again, not bagging on Buffalo Grove, who was the team in 7A who got added. They went 4 and 5. They had like 56 playoff points. So look, they played in a good conference. They played very strong non-conference opponents. That's the reason they were the first 4 and 5 team to get in. So, hey, they qualified just like everybody else. I think next year, Matt, we could see 5, 7, 10. You getting that feeling as well?
Yeah, because I think the landscape of football is changing. I think it's changing. It's changing at kind of a frantic speed, but we don't really notice. You're just going to have more and more teams. I don't know. I mean, you're just going to have a few more teams that are going to be going to 8-man, and that's just going to that's going to kind of mold and shape the whole nature of high school football. But yeah, I hear what you're saying also too about some of these 3A teams, going up there, and it's just a different type of football, and that 3A North, we don't need to analyze it too much. We know who's there.
Yeah.
But that's some really heavyweight, hard-nosed football. I mean, it's the who's who, the best of the best. And, just it's going to be really interesting. I mean, you got Genoa Kingston. I mean, as an 8 seed, they could be a sleeper. Stillman Valley. We feel like we haven't talked about Stillman Valley forever. They're 8-1.
Yep.
Seneca, we'll talk more about them later. And then, of course, that guy by the name of Jeff Boyer over there, Byron, knows how to coach football. So, The South, we've analyzed that a little bit too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that'll be 3A, and again, stick with us. We'll go over. We'll give you our picks in each class who we think are going to end up winning. Class 4A again. Now we're again you start hearing more outcry regarding mapping and who got placed in the North, who got placed in the South, and you have some interesting early matchups. Certainly. What caught my attention being in the Joliet area is seeing Providence Catholic in as a 13 seed in 4A in the North bracket, taking on the winner of Phillips and Joliet Catholic. So we have a potential Joliet Catholic JCA rematch in round 2. And again, that's not a given because Providence is at Wheaton Academy, who's a very good team this year. And Joliet Catholic's hosting Phillips. But I think odds are they'll both advance. And again, it's up and down the bracket. And I've heard it from the South as well, where you're playing some of these same schools and you're just are you really getting the best teams to the state final under this current system? I don't know if we are, and that's why I love to see again, and I'm going to go through and rework this, what 1 through 32 looks like versus the North and the South math here. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of the conversation you and I had. I think you opened this up a couple of years ago, like that it's just the same old teams continue to kind of run the table and how hard is it for the other teams to kind of get their program at that level? And I think that was the idea a little bit behind the 1 through 32. We want to see something different. And now we're back to 1 through 16 because of various things that are happening. I understand, but, it could be chalk, and you could have. These are not my words. I remember I talked to somebody else today on a radio station, and they would flat out say, like you get a team down here in 4A, maybe 3A, 4A, 5A, and then they're playing somebody in the state championship, and it just doesn't go well, and it's not even close. And I tried to be politically correct and just say, well, bigger school, bigger enrollment, player development is a little bit bigger. For every Blaine Tally that we have at Olympia, Kankakee and Maine South have about 7 or 8 of them on both sides of the line.
Right.
And so it is what it is.
And there's no avoiding the issue of the like and the dislike of the Catholic schools in these classes. And look, it's always been there. It's always going to be there, and I get it. But that is part of our system, like it or not.
Yeah.
I don't see Catholic privates being separated anytime soon. Again, that's an idea that was maybe 20 years too late to even think about that. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. I think it'll be a different landscape next year when we get back on the 2-year enrollment deal where we go through another 2 years. You'll have multipliers back in place. You'll have success factors back in place. I think it'll be a much different looking field in a lot of regards. I think there's some sleepers here for sure. I mentioned Providence Catholic in the North bracket. They're a very, very solid team. Played Joliet Catholic to a 1-touchdown game earlier in the year. I think they're very capable. Oh, by the way, the 1 seed's pretty good there too in Richmond. They're absolutely stacked. The lower portion of the upper part of 4A, again, saw Wheaton St. Francis lost a tough game in Immaculate Conception last Friday. Spartan's a little bit banged up, but I think they're going to be fine. I think they're strong enough to make a run here. You're looking for a sleeper. I mean, I don't know if you consider a 7 seed a sleeper, but Rochelle's a really good team that is physical. They run the football. They could be a real tough out for some people. And then the South bracket. Well, look at what we have here potentially in the semifinals.
Yeah.
It's Leonard Bowl 19 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I've lost track, but it sure looks that way. I mean, again, I see some sleepers there. I think Coal City's a team people better not overlook because they are battle tested. I like their draw there as well. Kind of interesting, Geneseo having to go to Carterville.
Yeah. So
there's a haul.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I was just going to say, hey, besides the Leonard Bowl lurking, okay, I think one of the kind of a unique storyline is Geneseel's going 680 miles.
Is it that far? Wow.
They're going all the way down to Carterville. I mean, it's about a 5-6 hour trip.
Yeah.
It's a long ways. I mean, you're talking a lot of gas there. You just wonder, like, that's a long. That's a haul.
Let's see. I bet they're pumped. I bet Carterville's pumped. I bet Geneseo's pumped. I know Geneseo's always pumped.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's who I started my football career out, was Larry Johnson Jr., who's the head coach there. They've kind of gotten away from the Augustana wing tee. They're running a little bit more spread power game.
For sure. Yeah.
And so they feel like they can take their team. They battled really well in the Western Big Six this year. They beat a Rock Island team. So they're 5-4. Again, this is more your wheelhouse. I'll just throw in my 2 cents. I think the North is going to be brutal. I mean, if you're looking for a second round game, of Joliet Catholic and maybe Wheaton Academy, I think whoever gets out of there probably gets Richmond in the quarters, and that's just going to be good. And how good is Hyde Park at 9-0? You know what I'm saying? And it's interesting. You look at these teams and you just don't really know. And then on the bottom bracket, you have Wheaton St. Francis. Yep. And then down south, like I said, SHG and Rochester. It's going to be interesting. The interview they had last year with Kenny Leonard, when he beat his son, it
was painful. Really,
it was painful. He didn't like it. And if you want to go real down south and get a real sleeper, maybe number 6 seed Murfreesboro. They've had tough losses to 9-0 Carterville, 8-1 Benton, a team that we've watched. So we've watched Murfreesboro. Benton beat them. However, I will just tell you this: the Red Devils from Murfreesboro, they've been averaging 41 points per game. So watch out for them. They made a run. Last year. See if they'll do it again this year.
See, the whole point of Geneseo going to Carterville, that's what we're hoping for with 1 through 32.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Right. So okay, gas prices, fine, I get it, but that's not going to stop. Gas prices aren't going to stop anyone in Geneseo from going to that game.
No.
They're all going to go.
And all
they're going to load up their green. They're going to wear their weird Green Bay Packer-like gear. Sorry, my Bears. I can't help it. But they will.
Olympia Spartans.
Olympia going to Benton.
They're waking up at 9:00 in the morning,
yep.
stopping to have lunch, and they're going to get there in the afternoon. So this is
that is how many of those Geneseo kids might not ever see anything in Southern Illinois ever again.
Sure.
They will this time.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of this playoff system. And that's why, again, I'm insistent that we try to get the 1 through 32.
Sure.
I'll say a year. I say this will last year. Next year we'll be on 1 through 32. That's kind of what I've heard.
So. Well, we've grinded through a pandemic. I think we can grind through. I'm not trying to be insensitive when I say that, but we've grinded through. We've grinded through a major culture. Seismic shift. A seismic shift in our country. I think we're getting used to paying the gas prices the way they are.
Yeah.
I don't mean to put a plug for Wally World, but you know what? If you want cheap gas, you usually just find somewhere where they have cheap gas. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, or just like everyone else, you readjust and you prioritize certain things over others, and
you carpool, everybody chips in.
Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt about it. And again, those are experiences that kids are never going to have. So take advantage while you have it, for sure.
Yep.
All right. Well, do you want to start putting on your thinking cap and making your picks here for 1A through?
Yeah. Do you want to do that? And then at the end we do my new segment.
We will. Well, we always close with your segment.
Okay, we'll do that. So
let's do our picks.
Let's do the brackets first here real quick. So
let's do our brackets. So
you want to go 4A first?
Sure, we'll go 4A. I think I did pick 1A. I did pick 1A through 8A on the IHSA thing, but honestly, Matt, I have no idea what I did that night. That's like a million years ago. So
yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna go by my gut here and tell you what I think. So 4A. Man, I I like St. Francis to get to the semi. That northern part, I go Richmond Burton. I think it'll be Richmond Burton, Sacred Heart, Kenny Leonard. I like a good story, and I did say that on the pairing show. I like a good story. I like a happy ending. Let's get Kenny Leonard one more and send him out in style. So I think Sacred Heart gets the win over Richmond Burton in the 4A final.
Well, your champion is Richmond Burton. You know, they won it last year. Very good football team. And I'm going to take Richmond Burton in some slobber knockers, you know, beating Joliet Catholic and eventually beating Wheaton St. Francis to get out of the North. And I think that they will be taking on Ken Leonard. And I think Ken Leonard and the Sacred Heart program is going to try valiantly. But I think Richmond Burton is going to be back-to-back state champs.
It's fair. I can see it either way. No doubt about it. Again, that would be a tremendous 4A final. No doubt about it. By the way, all these are in Champaign this year, in case you kind of forgot that.
Yep.
So,
Sure.
Class 3A, who's your pick?
Well, I'm going to think outside the box here a little bit, and it's kind of thinking outside the box because I think he's been knocking on the doorstep. I think he has the players. I think he's the one, excuse the pun, the one team in 3A that people don't talk about, but they probably should. And I think that is Coach Pearson at Princeton. I'm going to predict them to come out of the North. They'll probably be a lot of scrapes and bruises on their arms and their skin because that's a meat grinder. And they will be taking on in the South. They will be taking on, I'm going to pick the Fairbury Prairie Central Hawks out of Fairbury. And I think you'll have a very neat matchup, very two physical football teams, two undefeateds, and may the best team win. And I think it will be Ryan Pearson and Princeton.
There you go. 3A, again, I see a semifinal of Immaculate Conception and Reed Custer. There's something about this Reed Custer team. I think they find a way and they get in the state title game. Again, that's a tough call, though, because getting to see Immaculate Conception up close, Matt, they're really good. And they've got some talent. They've got some size up front.
And they probably have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder.
They do a lot of things really well. So that's a very strong team in Immaculate Conception. But you know, I think Reed Custer. Sometimes you get those teams that they just seem like they're on that path, and to me, Reed Custer seems like they're on that path. And I mean, it won't even be easy getting there. I can see them in Byron in a quarter being one heck of a ball game.
Sure.
But again, and then down south, I mean, you know, I can see Tolono maybe being a little bit of a dark horse there for a bit. But I still think Williamsville is solid. I think Williamsville gets to the final. I like Reed Custer beating Williamsville in the 3A final.
Yeah, and it'd be two spread teams kind of going at it.
Exactly. So, all right, 2A. Wow.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
I would love to go for the Decatur State title game, but I just can't.
Yeah. Okay.
That would make way too much sense. I will go. Boy, back-to-back state champ is really hard to do. It's seldom done. So I'm going to go Maroa to get to the state title game from the North. From the South, I don't know, Matt. I don't know. Nashville keeps calling me, and I don't mean Tennessee. I mean Nashville Hornets keep calling me. Yeah, what the heck? Let's go with that. Maroa, Nashville in the 2A final. Maroa wins the state title in 2A.
Well, I'm going to give a little love to our conference in the Saginaw. You know, okay. I will just say this. I think that in terms of physicality and game changers, and players that make a difference. I think Josh has those players.
Okay.
The quarterback is very good. They have a linebacker that's very good. And let me tell you, Memorial Stadium will be absolutely bonkers and packed if that is Maroa and St. T. And you talk about, having the state championship back in Memorial Stadium. The last time we had a team from around that area in there was Monticello, and they brought a boatload of people. If you had two Decatur schools going at it, it was a seismic shift in momentum late in the game. Coach Welder wins that championship. And let me tell you, I just think that we're going to have this Decatur St. Teresa has been knocking on the door. I think by far this is Mark Ramsey's best team. I have no reservations in saying that I think that game is going to happen. But there is something telling me that Josh Joseph is going to win a state championship in Maroa this year. Yeah. And it's just, for him to take his team down to Williamsville and beat them when they were kind of counted as an underdog. Williamsville is a 3A school, which, by the way, if you haven't been to that atmosphere and that route, that new facility, go check that out. But they won that game, and that's kind of catapulted them. That's my pick. I think it's going to be Maroa over St. T in the 2A.
I just saw, by the way, St. T's very good social media wise. They put a lot of good stuff out, and they just put, they finally finished their new track.
Yeah.
Looks phenomenal. They did a great job.
Great facility.
They did not go cheap on the amenities either. That's some custom stuff that they had done, and it looks fantastic. They did
it's a long time coming. And
oh my God. You think of some of the mud bowls that they played there over the years compared to now, and that changes the whole landscape for that program.
Yeah, no, it's
100%.
It's a great place for kids, and a great place to change some lives, and the facilities really help.
Yeah. All right, 1A. I guess I'll start. Okay, I like Lena to win 1A. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. You gotta go chalk until it's not chalk anymore.
Yeah.
Lena will be very good. I've talked up Hope Academy for a while. I think Hope can get to the semifinal. But what I'm even interested in how they do potentially against Forreston in round 2.
Yeah.
That'll be a telltale game, how well Hope can handle that.
Yeah, we'll talk about Hope Academy here in a minute. I think.
By the way, if that plays out, that game would be in Forreston.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So like if
that's happens, a big test for Hope Academy.
And here's the thing. I'm just going to throw this out there. There was one year, and I'm trying to think of the years because let's face it, Alabama. I mean, Lena Winslow has been in the state championship every year, or at least they've won it the last 5 out of 10 years.
Yep.
But there was one year when they took on Forreston, and Forreston beat them.
I know.
And it was the fumble game where Lena fumbled the ball. And I think Lena will be in a semifinal game against Forreston. If that game's at Forreston, I think it'll go down the wire, but I think Lena will win. In the South, I make no bones about this. I do think Colfax Ridgeview has the team to get there, but it's not going to be easy. They're going to have to get through Tuscola. They're going to have to get through Camp Point Central. If they get through those two, it's the matchup everybody wanted, and everybody was excited and happy. If you're a pure football traditionalist, you wanted Colfax Ridgeview in the South because everybody wants to see if they can knock off the defending state champions. And I'll go out on a limb, and I think that they can. I think they have the power and the strength up front. I think they have the coaching, and I think they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They've won some games this year against Tri-Valley, against Eureka, both on the road. They beat a very good El Paso team, who El Paso might be a sleeper there in round 1 against Farmington in 2A. So they've won some salty games in the HOIC, and the HOIC is no joke. They've created state champions. Let's see if they can do that this year. I'm predicting them to win the state championship in 1A.
Okay. Who am I to argue with you? I'll go with Colfax as well from the South. But sorry, Lena. It's Lena till it's not Lena. And Lena will let you know when they're done winning state titles, and they're not done yet.
I think it would be a great classic game, though.
Yep.
I think it would. I think it would be your Georgia-Alabama game, Kirby Smart against Nick Saban. I really do. And I think everybody wants it. Everybody wants to see it.
If Lena wins another one, can we start talking about them moving up? Yeah. Volunteering to move up? That'll fire some people up, huh?
Weight room freaks, and they're very, very, very good. And they got those black jerseys, and let's face it, it's lay win, and they win a lot.
Let's move them up to 3A. Let's see how they do in 3A.
Be really interesting.
I think it'd be okay.
There's a lot of teams they can beat.
Yeah. All right. Well, Matt, congratulations. It's 50 minutes. You almost went a full hour. I know you take great pride in that.
Well, I still have my four plays. Remember, we were going to do that. Can I do that real quick?
Let's do it. Matt, again, always brings a new segment come postseason. I know he's worked hard on this, whether it's any good or not, to be seen. But Matt, the dance floor is yours. Give us your 4 plays.
So you had 4 plays. I just call it 4 plays to win the football game, and I try to just keep everything 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the first play is 1A, and it's Coach Chris Mellett at Hope Academy. And Edgy, you can chime in on this too. He was an assistant at Phillips. So today's theme is going to be about coaches. He was an assistant at Phillips when they won a couple of titles. He was a head coach of Whitney Young. Now he's at Hope Academy. He has them playing well. He has gone 7-3, 6-4, and he's now 9-0 in 2022. Watch out for Hope Academy. In 2A, Kevin Brock from BCC. It's going to be really interesting. I just call this the Saints are marching in, man. He is a BCC alum. He's taken over a team that was 0-9 in 2019, and Coach Brock has brought a rebuilding and an intensity to BCC and got them back in the playoffs for the first time since 2017. After they had rattled off 15 playoff consecutive appearances. They had a state title, a state runner-up. The Saints are marching back in, He has brought an intensity and enthusiasm back to that BCC program. So it's going to be really interesting. 3A. I kind of call this the Fighting Irish here, okay? So it's going to be really interesting. Speed wins football games. Terry Maxwell. He's a St. Joe assistant coach for the longest time. In Seneca, they've only won 9 games in a row. They've only won 9 games in a season now 5 times. In their history. And this guy really has it going on. Okay, they have a track program and a football program that really is basing everything off of speed. He has them on the right track, and I like how they play. They're the Fighting Irish. They're going after people, and watch for them maybe win a game or 2 in 2A or in 3A. Excuse me.
Yeah, and then finally 4A.
In 4A, the Bombers are for real. Tanner Harrell over at Macomb. Before last season, the Bombers had not qualified for the playoffs since 2012. So it's been a 10-year absence, and that's a long time. He's a 2008 Macomb Bomber graduate. They've scored an incredible 408 points this season. Have only given up 90. Could they make some noise in 4A? Maybe in the South they could. Again, a 10-year absence, and they're back, and they're feeling really good. They got a great quarterback, a great receiver, 2 good running backs. It's a great story. When you've been out of the playoffs for 10 years and then you're back, it's nice to know that you have a chance, and I think they have a chance to kind of do something special. Fair
to say a lot of people are going to be watching to see how they do from a results standpoint. Obviously, playing in a conference where they're kind of the big dog, playing a lot smaller enrollments, and now you're jumping into 4A. I think a lot of people, I know myself, I'm very interested to see how they chartered those waters right out of the gates.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting because they do have some game changers. The quarterback is real deal. The Jutter kid, I think it's Jutter kid.
Well, like you said, speed's the great equalizer. So
speed's the great equalizer, and they're at home, like you said. If you're 9-0, and it's like your first time in the big dance, at least you're 9 at home and you have some home cooking. Okay, you don't have to go on the road. But I can tell you what, we've talked about this theme all night. There's a lot of 5-4 teams in. There's a lot of 5-4 teams that probably could be 6-3, 7-2.
Yep.
And so they're going to have their hands full in week 1. But Macomb is a good story for high school football.
No doubt. All right, pal. I think we've done it justice, almost 1 hour straight. And I know knowing you could have gone another 40 minutes.
Oh, my God.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Anything else you want to add?
Our bus situation will be rectified next week, so everybody will have a bus. There'll be more buses.
Are you driving?
Well, yeah, of course. I'll drive the bus.
I'd love to get a picture of that.
Yeah, pork chops are still cooking, which I think we have a champion in the pork chop thing. I think it's Spring Valley
Hall, right?
And
the parents,
everybody's ready, man. You got the playoff shirts. Everybody's ready. This is the greatest time of the year, and thanks for letting me jump on board, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, again, he's the coach, Matt Leng. I'm EDGYTIM. Thanks for watching, everybody. And again, we'll be back next week. We'll break down the results from round 1. We will look ahead to round 2. 8-man all the way through class 4A. Always here for you to talk about it. Love your feedback. Any thoughts, suggestions? Want to ask me what this hat is all about? I'll tell you. But we'll cover that next week on the show. For Matt Leng, I'm EDGYTIM. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Go out and watch a football game or 2 or 3 or 5 this weekend, will you?